Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepointe Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepointe helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
Customer experience and customer journey are not new terms. So why are they all over your LinkedIn feed right now? Well, because we don't want to keep talking about the pandemic. New ways of engaging with customers were invented literally overnight. Necessity, after all, is the mother of invention, but I wonder if invention is the mother of expectations. And this is a discussion about customer expectations. We have the highest expectation of customer service in history and the most transient, flexibility demanding workforce in history to deliver it. That's why your feed is chock full of customer experience solutions. My guest on this episode says it's easier to launch a satellite into space than it is to get customer experience perfect. And he would know because he's done both. Scott Prater is the VP of CX Technology for Bridgepointe CX, and he has personally addressed some of the most challenging customer experience problems at some of the world's most well-known brands. And if you like the experience you're getting here on The Bridge, please make sure you follow us, The Bridge with Scott Kinka, on your favorite podcast platform. And a like and a 5-star wouldn't be too bad either. But in the short term, let's jump into satellites and customer experience with Scott Prater. Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Bridge. I've been trying to schedule this episode for a while, so I'm pretty excited. My guest on this episode is Bridgepointe's own VP of CX Technology, Scott Prater. Scott, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Glad we finally got to get this done.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, the reason we don't get it done is that you spend so much time in the field with clients, which is going to be quite a bit of what we're talking about today. But before we get into that, what I'm hoping you can do is just give us a little bit on who Scott Prater is, what you do here, maybe a little bit on your background.
Sure. Yeah. I'm the Senior Vice President of CX Technology. So really what that means are a couple things. One is I own the executive relationship working with all the key CX players that we work with, right? So got the ability to reach into them. I'm on a lot of their advisory councils, really keeping a pulse of what they're doing in the industry so I can help our customers. And then from the technology engagement front, we've got a whole team that works under Scott Cassin's organization that are basically experts in consulting technology, and they lean into me when it comes to trying to understand the vendor landscape. It's so big. There's so many vendors out there. There's no way anybody can know them all. So it's my job to make sure I'm just deep enough on every single one of them to be able to help out the team internally and our customers as well.
Fantastic. How long have you been in this business?
So interesting journey. So I have 23 years in CX technology. In 2001, I kind of dropped into it for a little company at the time called AOL, which is here in Northern Virginia, where I'm based, back when they had 38 million members and, were able to break every single piece of technology came in. So I got dropped in as a general technologist, somebody that knew enough about networking and voice to say, hey, there's this new thing called voice over IP. Scott, can you take a look at that and see how we might be able to use it in the contact center space? So by end of 2002, I had 10,000 seats of what would now be called private cloud, hosted cloud, voice over IP contact centers. That's really where I got my start, and the journey through there from various roles. I've worked for some vendors in the place. I've worked for Vi. I've worked for Barrett. 2010, I fully pivoted to cloud. I saw where things were going with cloud, and since 2010, I've been fully cloud, either working for vendors or since 2014, essentially, doing consulting. Interesting when I say how I got there. I literally started my career in space and defense. So the first 11 years of my career, I put satellites into space, which arguably is a lot easier than doing what I do today because there's no humans involved in that. It's all ones and zeros and it's all
Right.
physics. So it is more complex than satellites.
That's a quotable. So it's easier to launch a satellite into space than it is to keep a customer happy.
Very true. Very true.
Well, that makes customer experience really important. Before we jump into customer experience, Northern Virginia, what else can you tell us about Scott Prater, the family guy, more so than the business guy?
Yeah, I've been married for 33, 34 years to a wonderful woman who's put up with me for a very long time, especially as you mentioned, traveling extensively for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
I think she sees me less than she does, than she probably should. I got 3 kids, 5 grandkids, 2 more on the way. Avid basketball fan. University of Kentucky is my team. Dabble in the NBA a little bit, but I'm a college basketball junkie.
Love it. I'll have to get you up to one of those big 5 double headers at the Palestra, which is what Philly's known for. The 5 Philly teams have like a fake conference, but they've been playing together in the same gym that fits 2,000 people for 100 years. So the traditions there are kind of crazy. And ESPN always does like a double header day, right there in the Palestra, which is awesome. So I'm a LaSalle Explorer, so one of those 5 teams happens to be my squad, and we have a good time. So remind me on that one. I try to get to that day every year.
Will do.
Well, let's jump into the meat, Scott. You have a career that spans 30 years in customer service and what we're calling today customer experience, and yet somehow it's all over the news like it's some new concept, right? Like, let's just lay that out. So, I mean, why is, half of what we're seeing on the internet right now and in, not just in technology blogs, but in like, business growth articles and Harvard Business Journal and 2.0 and Inc. It's all about customer experience, customer experience, customer experience. Why now? Like, why are we taking this seriously now? Or why does this seem like a new topic today in your mind?
Well, things have changed so much in the 20 plus years I've been doing this. It used to be a voice world. Everything was very straightforward. Everybody assumed that the way you engage within enterprises with a voice call, right? And then digital engagement increasingly came on, started as chat and email and things like that. And now we have this disruptor called social media. Great case in point. I had a challenge recently with a bank, a very big bank, top 10 bank that I work with. And it was a fraud issue and they weren't responding properly. So I did a little social media post and it managed to get 15,000 views inside of 48 hours. And within one day from that, I got a call from the office of the president of that bank, right? Why? Because their brand was tarnished. And actually, they initially came to me not believing my story, but when I told them, they said, "Oh, yeah, that's really a serious problem." And I said, "Well, and I've been trying to explain that to the 15 different customer service reps I've talked to and transferred." So that story is exactly why customer experience is so huge today. Something like that can impact your brand. It can either drive your revenue or hurt your revenue.
Yeah. So your point about it changing is that it's become not only have expectations changed, right? You mentioned kind of multiple channels. We've engaged in chat, we've engaged in text, we've engaged in others, but also that social media has really become part of it, and that's really that's a one-to-one, but it's kind of like a one-to-one in the space of a one-to-many connection. It's almost like a public one-to-one customer experience engagement. Is that a fair way for me to be thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely fair way. I mean, it usually starts one to many. And the brands that are doing it right quickly convert that social media experience into one-to-one and turn it into a servicing channel, right? Sometimes there's limitations on it depending on the industry you're in, like financial services or things like that. There's only so much you can do over it. And you made to change medias to something that's more secure. But ideally, yes, you pivot a one-to-many complaint into a one-to-one contact to to ultimately drive the solution that the customer's complaining about. I mean, if you look at the industry, and I'm sure, Scott, you've seen the same things, right? You say that basically for every 10 positive customer experiences, people say nothing, but but it only takes one of those ultimately for someone to say something, right? I know, honestly, I'm the same way. I rarely leave reviews for anything unless it's like a super duper positive experience, but all it has to be slightly negative, and I am out there talking about
it. So let me ask you this question. I mean, social media is often seen in the realm of the marketing department, right? Mm-hmm. So like when you meet with customers, how often is it that they're still considering like social media belonging to someone else other than the support or customer facing organization?
It's interesting. It's a great question, because it used to be totally, when you would talk to a customer about social media channels, they would say, oh, our marketing department handles that. We have Sprinkler. That was like the common answer you always heard. We use Sprinkler for social media monitoring. They're kind of one of the big kings in that space. But increasingly, and that was just brand protection, right? The story I told, that's all that did. It was brand promotion, brand protection. But because of what I said around the fact of turning that one-to-many into one-to-one, you then now have to pivot into the customer care side. So increasingly, when we talk to customers about business transformation, marketing is a stakeholder in the decision, because there's usually some kind of use case where things are going to pivot from a brand protection social media scheme into a customer care social media scheme. So you need to make sure the technology are aligned. You need to make sure the business processes are aligned. Whereas I would say 5 years ago, it was handled totally separately, and all marketing did was brand protection.
Yeah. Well, and Sprinkler, who's a partner of ours, right? They've pivoted, right? Like they started on the social media side, and they, along with their customer demands, it's almost like their platform went the other direction, right? As opposed to like traditional call centers trying to add a channel to be able to support social media. They started in social media management and kind of came back the other way, almost like a next gen approach. But, now they've got the other channels as part of that platform. Sort of an interesting way of thinking about it, right?
Oh, no, it absolutely is. I mean, if you look at the traditional CCaaS players out there, it all started as voice companies, right? They've all boosted their digital capabilities, and they're all at various stages of maturity, right? And then the inverse, there's Sprinklers and other companies like that, right? That all started in digital and are pivoting into voice. So it's this interesting trajectory going back and forth between the two, that they're all fighting for the same wallet share now, with differing perspectives on how they approach it.
Well, I mean, and also think about it from the perspective of like the CRM vendors, the ERP vendors, the support system, and ticketing vendors. Like everybody's a little bit of a customer experience application right now, but it's like a big old Venn diagram now, like of who covers what. Are the CRM players real players in the kind of contact center as a service market in your mind?
So yes and no. So it's interesting. 5 years ago, and I remember talking to all the major CCaaS players, when you talked about digital channels to them, and the CRM players have had them. They've had chat and they've had email forever, lesser extent social media, but the two main care channels, right? The CCaaS players used to say, "Oh no, we'll let the CRM player have them. We just want voice. That's all we want," right?
Yeah.
And now increasingly, the CCaaS providers say, we want to have the chat, we want to have the email, we want to have that digital stuff to provide better reporting, better data analytics, a true omni-channel experience. And conversely, you've got the CRM players trying to sell their version of AI, saying, well, here's why you should work with us. Look at all the stuff we can do with our AI inside our platform. And it's an interesting conversation point when you talk to a customer is, you're going to use a CRM, and no matter what, the CRM is usually going to be the main screen on your desktop, right? But you really get into a serious discussion around what are your use cases and what are your business processes and where should you have those channels reside? Because you can present them within the CRM all day long. But when it comes to a data integrity, when it comes to the ability to mine the data, it's easier if all the customer journey data is in a single repository, which it is when you put it in the CCaaS platform versus on the CRM side. If it's on the CRM side, the CRM's having to import all of this voice information and mash it all together to then try and figure out the customer experience. So there's some additional complexity to it when it resides in the CRM.
Scott, you mentioned customer journey. Could you just describe that for our listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with that term as opposed to customer experience?
Yeah, so I had a very early experience in customer journey, and it's funny. I remember getting this question over and over. I used to work for a company called ClickFox back in 2010. It's now called Prater CX. So imagine in 2010 going into enterprise and trying to sell customer journey analytics, right? And honestly, that was the question. Well, what do you mean customer journey is what the
Yeah.
question would say. They'd say, we have our own analytics capabilities, right? We know what happens on our website, right? And we know what happens when people call us. And we know what happens when we get the emails. I said, but do you know when somebody, and I'll use a use case with, say, a wireless thing. Let's say somebody goes into a wireless store, they get a new phone. That phone then gets provisioned. They go home. They have a problem. Then they go and try to chat, and they can't solve that problem via chat. And then they call, and then ultimately that problem gets solved. That's the customer journey right there. And if you have the right kind of analytics, you can actually go back and look and say, you know what? We see that journey happening 5% of the time from this one specific store. What's going on in that store that's, at the provisioning point of the phone that's causing all this to happen, right? And that's why it's so powerful to understand the entire journey.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Let me tie that then to something that's been on my mind about this. I asked you earlier what's changed, and certainly you've brought technology and social media, things of that nature. We oftentimes talk on this show about how kind of the trajectory and our use of technology has changed since the pandemic. And I know people don't want to talk about the pandemic anymore, but I think in customer experience is particularly pertinent, right? Because I think two things happen. So I'll make the statement and then I'll ask you to sort of comment on it. I think, and both affect the customer experience, customer service, customer journey operation inside of a business, right? One is, during the pandemic, we couldn't leave our homes. And so, necessity is the mother of invention, but invention's the mother of expectation, right? So, now everybody's thinking Uber Eats, like I can snap my fingers because, the smart businesses that succeeded in the pandemic did so without the expectation of a brick and mortar. So now, you should know everything about me and be able to do everything. So customer expectations increased post-pandemic, right? That's one. The crazy juxtaposition is at the same time, the concept of the physical brick and mortar office has largely cratered in the domestic United States. So the people that you need to like over the shoulder train and do all those things to ensure that you're keeping the brand and customer experience image up are not under your thumb anymore. Correct. Right. So like, I find this to be a super interesting time in customer experience because we're sort of mashing together the highest level of expectations we've ever had and the least control over the people who are answering those expectations. I mean, is that, just comment on that in your mind. And certainly like you speak with customers every day. Is this one of the things that they're struggling with?
No, it absolutely is. And it's interesting because we've kind of reached an inflection point, right? The pandemic was in 2020. Typically technology purchase cycles are roughly around 3 years, right? So there were a lot of purchases made in 2020, and now all of this stuff is being, recirculated. Did we do the right thing? Is it serving the right thing? I mean, it's such a great point. Everybody, and we had customers. I mean, I remember one customer, we had to help them figure out how to send 5,000 agent homes in 30 days, right? BPO, global, around the world. That was very traumatic for the enterprise to manage through. And when you initially do that, to your point, you send them home with the same core technologies they have when they're sitting in the office, when somebody can walk up and tap them on the shoulder, when they can walk into a huddle room with their coach and go through this stuff, right? So there was a breakage there. There was absolutely a breakage there on how to coach and train these people, much less from a security aspect, how to monitor and manage them. And all these technologies came into play to the point. There are technologies now that, you can put in or see as the agent really staring at the screen when they're at home, right? So the smart companies found different levels of, I'll call it big brother technologies that allow them to coach and mentor and monitor their agents, right? Other ones just sent them home and assumed the same business processes and the same monitoring would work, and they didn't. And those are the companies that did not succeed well, right? They just literally took their same voice-centric approach, sent people home and said, let's do the same thing. right? So the financial institutions, I mean, I remember going on big banks' websites, and the first thing you would see, like, you will have a very long call time if you call. But the ones that successfully pivoted to digitization in the last 2-3 years since then, and a lot of them have now won, right? They now have won. And
Yeah.
if you look at how contacts are coming into them, they're increasingly less voice and more digital. Everybody's been saying voice is going away forever. It's never going to go away, but is it going to continue to shrink? Absolutely, it will. And I think the pandemic was a key enabler of that.
I think that I think the generations that are entering the workforce, entering the borrowing force, and the banking force, and the housing, owners are also changing that too, right? I mean, arguably, the younger the person needing support, the less interested they are in talking to someone. Right?
Oh,
And I
to
recognize that I'm
extreme.
generalizing, but that's also happening at the same time too, right?
Oh no, so true. I remember when I sent my daughter off to college and she could not get done what she needed to do with Xfinity via chat or email, and she refused to call. I had to get her account number and actually pick up the phone and call and do it for her. Right. And again, that's generational. She's 32
Yeah.
years old now, right? That was when she was 22. She's like, I don't call you. You shouldn't have
Yeah.
to talk to anybody to solve your problem.
Scott, I'm going to hit you with a couple quick questions, and then we're going to have some fun. But let me wrap this. I had a list of things I wanted to get to, and we got so wrapped up in the early part of the conversation, which is awesome. I didn't get to all of them, so let me hit you with a few. One, you mentioned marketing being part of this, and I sort of made a mental note. So let me ask a more macro level question. Your customer for
Yeah.
customer experience and CCAS and technology has generally often been the head of customer service or the head of the contact center, those kinds of things. You mentioned marketing being a new customer. How else is your audience changing? Like, who's getting involved besides technology and customer service in the selection and evaluation of technology, and also the strategy around how it's used?
Yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic. I would say, and then going back to my days in 2005 when I sold for Avaya, right? And back then, and even I'd say all the way up to about 2010, typically the buyer was the IT organization, right? The
Mm-hmm.
business came to the IT organization, said, I need a contact center solution, and they went out and got it. They gave them the requirements, but IT was the decision maker. Increasingly, you started to see things changing. And right around 2014, 2015, when I saw it becoming the business buyer coming over, right? And at that point, it truly was the business buyer aligning with the consulting firm to get what they want because IT wouldn't give it to them,
Yeah.
right? So that is what you saw then. I would say in the last 3 years, it's been more of a collaborative approach between the two. I think the IT organizations see the value of cloud technologies. They see the value that they bring for all the various reasons people move to them, and ideally they partner with the business. Increasingly, you're seeing security as a bigger stakeholder. A lot of technologies have moved to either Amazon or any Google, Azure, these various cloud platforms. So a lot of them have established security standards there. But now the whole CISO has become a key stakeholder in everything, especially as you're moving into digitization. You increasingly see it used to be just a checkbox. Now, a lot of time you'll see the CISO at the table in the discussion. So you'll have, clearly the SVP of care, whoever the head of care is, whoever the head of IT is. A lot of times, a chief marketing officer, someone senior in marketing, and oftentimes now a senior security representative, all at the table. Whereas before, you never had more than two.
Yeah, I mean, the more you engage in a customer journey, the more data you need on the customer. But privacy laws are increasing, so I imagine that the CISO is heavily involved. Has to heavily be involved in that process. You know what I mean? If you're gonna give a good customer journey experience, you've also got to worry about right to be forgotten and all the other privacy stuff that's going on right now. So that's an interesting take. Scott, do you personally often get involved in rationalizing those multiple needs from those multiple constituents together to get the company to a technology decision, right? I mean, this is you personally in your consulting
Yep.
work.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's especially on large, complex ones, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
anything that's significant in size, 1,000 seats or more, multiple different stakeholders. There's a lot of, I call it soft skills there that need to work with these customers. I mean, because they all have their own agendas. And the one thing they all have to understand is no one's ever going to get 100% of what they want, right? If that happens, what it leads to is no decision, and ultimately things don't improve for anybody. And you have to collaborate and work with them to make them realize the individual value points relative to their role, be it the head of care, be it the head of IT, be it the head of marketing, or and make them all understand the value components to them, and make them understand this is the changes that are going to happen. Because when you do this change, it's not just the technology. There's people and process changes to go with it. And those are the things that they all really need to understand and ultimately rationalize internally as well when they make that kind of decision.
Prater, I think we're gonna print you an alternative business card. We're gonna call it customer experience therapist. I think is maybe a good way.
There is a lot of that, as you know, to any sales process. I can't tell you the number of customers that will call me after call and saying, "Thank you so much for helping me with that." You know,
sure. You mentioned a couple already, and if there's not a burning one, that's okay. We can move on to the next question. But like, you walk in, nobody I know sees more unique, customer experience mousetraps that have been built than you do, right? What's one of the big mistakes that you still see companies making today?
Easily the single biggest one, and I see this, in talking with them up front in the consulting phase, more often than not, when we get reach outs from customers that have already made a change to the CCaaS platform, and it's 6 months, 12 months after, and a lot of it, honestly, quite frankly, has happened more post-pandemic, is because you had to make the change so fast for such various reasons. You literally picked up your existing customer experience, your existing processes, and you drop that into the new platform, even though the new platform has all kinds of bells and whistles and can go like a Ferrari on the track. You're driving it like a VW Bug. And the business leaders look at this and say, I don't see how anything's changed. My metrics are not improved, right? One of the key things you have to do, and we work through this in our consulting practices, is not only align the key capabilities and ROI tied to those capabilities. Let's look at what the new KPIs are. Let's understand what they were before and what the needle should move to postward. So there's a true feedback loop that says, this is the experience we changed. This is the impact we saw into reduction of cost per contact or increase of revenue per call or whatever that metric is, and make sure it's measured. Because oftentimes it just gets into, hey, we took 10,000 calls last month. Hey, we could take 10,000 calls on a new platform. Great. Well, you really didn't do anything. You ripped the walls off the house and you changed out the copper pipes for PVC pipes and put the walls back on. You didn't do anything.
Right. I get it. It's the optimize versus rip and replace. And I think one thing people don't even think about in rip and replace kind of scenarios is that like every tool does the same basic features, but they do them differently. So like sometimes your process just won't even work, even if you want to keep it the same well in the new platform. All right, I'm gonna hit you with a couple other quick ones. Trends, like what's the number one trend you're seeing that's popping into all these conversations?
So AI and most specifically generative AI, which is fascinating from the standpoint of really when ChatGPT came out in November of last year, all anyone is talking about is generative AI and what it can do. And don't get me wrong, it's a great tool. I use it all the time to help me rewrite things, to help me brainstorm ideas. But it's almost like customers have leapfrogged the value of cognitive AI, right? Which is honestly more robust, it's more mature. There's tons of value into it relative to analyzing 100% of the contacts you've got and figuring out exactly what's going on and be able to make tangible changes in your business versus let's figure out how we can, creatively say things in our knowledge base and hope they don't go off the rails, and see that we can automate a bunch of stuff, right? I firmly believe is you need to get the foundation right first with your AI strategy around cognitive before you really go off into the generative AI space. And generative AI is best unleashed on internal employees first, internal IT help desk, use cases like that, before you set it leash on customers. And by all means, it is mature enough that it can do great things, but it's not like flipping a switch. And people
well informed, I guess is really the thing that most people miss, right? Like,
exactly.
AI doesn't make up for a lack of actual having process documentation. You know what I mean? Like it'll lack of having good data on your customers. It can't make that up.
Yeah.
So it's those types of things that are interesting. So I get you. Start with this. Begin with the end in mind. Go figure. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Before
Well,
we get
one
to
other
the
thing,
fun,
Scott.
yeah.
No, one other thing, and you and I, and here's the other thing. It is such a cluttered space now. I think I read something recently. There's like $17 billion between VC and PE money invested in companies that are .ai, right? So there's tons of companies out there, and you and I have been on a call before. I'm pretty sure what the customer said to us, I get between 20 and 50 prospecting emails a week from AI companies telling that they can solve all my problems, right? It is very challenging for customers because they got so much flying at them.
Yeah. Well, again, like you need to understand the problem you're trying to solve, right? And the tool and the data and the information that you have internally to try and solve it. It's almost like, which is almost sort of a predecessor to the AI conversation, right? But like we're having the bot conversation 3 years ago. I'm going to turn on bots and I'm going to not have agents. And I was like, well, what's informing the bot? Well, we don't have those things written down. Well, then I don't know what you're hoping to get done. Like, so if there's not a place you can train an agent, then there's not a place you can train a bot. There's the same kind of thing, right? And that's really one of the big misses that I see when we get involved in these conversations is like, kind of, it's like cloud years ago. I equate it to that all the time. Let's go do cloud to move our crappy workload. Well, your crappy workload is still a crappy workload somewhere else. It's the same kind of thing in hosting, right? Let me ask you a different question. Last one. Can you tell us a fun customer story that wraps up some of these concepts that are here? And if you can share who, great. If you need to change the names to protect the innocent, just tell us what kind of industry they're in. But give us a customer story that encapsulates some of what we chatted about.
No, it was actually one of the first ones that I did. Going back to 2015, 2016, I think it really showed the power of business transformation and the power of moving to a cloud-based platform. It was customer in financial services vertical. They're in the money movement business, right? So very, very super transactional business, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it is literally somebody walking into one place saying, I want to send money. And this way it was back then. And the money goes to the other end. And then there's all this regulatory stuff in between to make sure that it's not fraud, right?
Yeah.
So you got to imagine all the different kind of calls that they had come into their enterprise, 100% handled by BPOs. It was very, very broken. They had 3 different quality systems out there. When there was some kind of escalation, it would take them 2 to 3 days to find the call. A lot of time this was driven by federal regulators asking for information, right? And it was just the classic, we've got multiple different systems, none of them, attached and integrated. And, we ultimately did 2 things for them. One is we realized that the IVR for them was a point that could really drive a ton of value. So we just did some IVR analytics for them and literally came up with some concepts for them that allowed them to increase their call containment by 5%. That actually drove $3 million in cost savings for them. And we did that within 90 days, right? So that then gave them, and that was all BPO reduced costs, right? That then gave them the funding to actually go in and say, okay, we want to transform this business, right? We've got $3 million in cost savings. We've got the budget for it. We're not going to spend it. So that gives them the opportunity to go through and be thoughtful. They moved to a centralized contact center platform, cloud-based platform, put everything, on a single platform, the QA, everything on it. And ultimately, what it really did for them is it continued to drive down their operating costs. So even postwards, they drove down their operating costs another 5%. But most importantly, at any given time, given this highly regulated environment, if there was some kind of an issue, they could have the call in minutes and provide it to the regulators. And they were in the industry that if you didn't do things right regulatory, you would get $50, $100, $150 million fines.
Yeah.
And they felt just by, and this is the basics, not nearly as advanced as we do today. This was just getting the foundational stuff in place, getting everything instrumented, getting the ability to understand your own data fundamentally allows you to manage your business so much better, right? And that's phase 1 for everybody today when you're moving from a premise platform to a cloud platform. Now they've gotten to the point where they deployed bots and they've moved into digitization and so much with the mobile app now. And they've integrated digital care into the mobile app, into their contact center, right? So it's fascinating to see the evolution. Once you get the foundation in place, You can see what the use cases are and then do that advanced stuff with the bots, with the AI technology.
Yeah. Totally amazing. And, I think for those people who are in customer experience, or maybe executives who are thinking about their customers' journeys, one thing that you and your teammates are exceptional at is this concept of kind of the art of the possible workshop, right? Like, it's one thing we very often are involved in. Can you solve this problem? Can you implement this technology? Can you go after this KPI? Can you save us this money? But a lot of times, even customers go, I know I need to do something. I just don't know what. They need the doctor's visit. It's sort of the best way that I can describe what you guys do. And then sort of a little bit of the dreamer session, like what would you want it to be? So, if you found listeners, if you found Mr. Prater's insights here to be particularly interesting, that's something that we can chat about, sort of doing an art of the possible workshop with your customer experience team, with Prater and our CX consultants. Scott, I'm going to have a little bit of fun with you, and then we're going to let you go.
Okay.
I know you got a busy day. I think 6 minutes, you're on a customer meeting, so we'll keep these super quick. Number one, I need a prediction of any kind, be a soothsayer for the next, 12 to 18 months. I don't care. It doesn't need to be in tech. It can be anywhere. It can be sports. It can be geopolitical. I don't care. Let's just stay away from election stuff.
I want to stay in tech because I get asked this all the time by customers. They because they not only are they looking at the different vendors out there, they're also saying, tell me about these vendors, tell me about their financials, tell me about their trends, tell me about what's going on with M&A activities, right? So you're still seeing M&A activities all the time. NICE recently bought LiveVox. I think in the next 18 months, we're going to see the first shoe fall of a CRM company acquiring a significant CCaaS player. Everybody's saying it's going to happen for years and years and years. You now have Zendesk owned by PE. They also are the majority owner of Genesis, and they're also a minority owner of Sprinkler. That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, it is. Okay. All right. So we're going to come back to you when that happens, by the way. We'll do a hot take episode because it's very specific. Normally people there's going to be lots of AI next year. Like, I think we all know that at this point. So that was very specific. I like that. We'll put that in the book. Speaking of books, what are you reading? What's on Prater's end table right now? What's your business tome?
I usually like reading sports analogy books. I mean, going back, there's so much leadership in sports, I think, and this is an old one I pulled off the shelf recently. I think it was a book, not that I'm a big fan. Remember, going back that I'm a Kentucky guy. Rick Pitino was our coach for a long time. And, there was some falling out there, but he wrote a book called Success is a Choice. And, it's all about leadership. And there's so much analogy between sports and especially team sports. In business, I think they're all great.
What was the name of the book again? Success is a Choice.
I think it's called Success is a Choice. It's on the bookshelf right back there.
We'll link to it. It's all good. Pitino's book about success.
Right now, it's the blue one. If you see behind me, it's the blue one on the shelf back there.
All good. All right, last one, fun one. The next pandemic happens, or end of the world dystopian event, and one app is still functioning on your phone. You get to choose. Which one is it?
Oh my gosh! All right, don't make fun of me, okay? Yeah. I mean, because there's functional, and then there's fun and functional. It needs to be TikTok. It needs to be TikTok, and here's why.
Okay, shoot.
I learned so much stuff from TikTok. Right? My wife loves me right now because I'll cook dinner, and she'll be like, "Where did you get this meal from?" TikTok recipe, right? It's super educational, and honestly, there's even there's business channels that you subscribe to, and there's all these business nuggets you get every day. It's almost like your Google panel. If you tune it right, you get a lot of useful information. It's not just a waste of time.
Okay. It's funny because Gene and I have been talking about whether we need to be pushing the contents of this podcast out through TikTok, and we've gone back and forth on it. But so interesting to hear you say that, because you're one of the most learned men that I know. Grandfather of 5. Look at you, TikTok. I'm really impressed with your work. That's fabulous.
My kids are impressed too. They're like, "Dad, I can't believe TikTok."
I'm not even on the. I play with my kids all the time. I'm like, "Are you on the Faceagram tonight, or the TikTok. Like, what are these? Facebook used to be more of that, and Twitter now. X is all over the place. So TikTok is your place, which I get. Scott, this is a great conversation. I promised I'd have you off by the top of the hour, and here we are at the top of our hour. Certainly, 35 or 37 minutes or so into the podcast. So we appreciate your time, and we appreciate the listeners for hanging with us. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about what Scott and team do here at Bridgepointe, check us out at bridgepointetechnologies.com. And for more content like this, make sure that you're following us on your favorite podcast platform. This is The Bridge with Scott Kinka. And thank you all for your time. We'll see you soon on another episode of The Bridge.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepointe Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepointe, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointetechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepointe, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at BPT3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.